The Draft Xpert tool functions much like the Fillet Expert. It takes the manual draft mode and it also adds in the draft analysis tool. If you're not familiar with the draft analysis tool, we'll take a look at that first. So I'll come into the Evaluate tab and choose Draft Analysis. And then the first option is to choose a direction of pull, and we'll just choose the bottom face and flip it. Now this is going to create a draft analysis based on an angle that we choose. So it'll take a look at all the remaining faces with respect to the direction of pull, and it'll also display the draft angle as you hover over it. In this case, we see that all our side faces require draft. That's because by default there's 0 draft on this part. There's also a gradual transition option, and this will paint the part based on the draft angle. This isn't very useful for straight faces, but if you're working with a lot of curves, this will give you a good idea of the draft at different points along a face. And as I stated earlier, this feature is included in the Draft Xpert. So if we're using that feature, we don't have to worry about using the draft analysis tool. So once again, the first option is the direction of pull or the neutral plane. So we'll select out that bottom face. And then we have an option for auto paint, which will show us what requires draft, or rather what has negative draft and what has positive draft. And it'll also show a gradient in between if you have a curved face. If you hover over the faces, you'll also notice that it displays the angle of draft. Now if we want to come in and add draft to several faces, we can do that as well. I'll set this to 3 degrees and select out these faces and apply 3 degrees of draft. And that'll automatically update the auto paint. So now we see we have 3 degrees of draft on all those faces. We can come in and add a different draft to the outside faces here. I could add 4 degrees and maybe add 2 degrees to the remaining faces on the outside there. You'll also notice when I increase the degree of draft here, it's going to change that auto paint as it selects a range between 0 and the angle of draft that you choose. So if we put in 3 degrees, for example, we can see that the only face that is below 3 degrees, or the only outside faces below 3 degrees, are these 3 faces here. The Draft Xpert also gives you the option of changing a draft. So rather than trying to add more draft to these faces, we could come in and change this to, let's say, 3 degrees. We also have the option of selecting draft by draft angle within the change option. So you can see that the Draft Xpert allows you to quickly add different sets of draft to different faces, as well as updating changes within those drafts.